Number 9. Chingiz Bekhanov and Nazirke Bekjanova. For a lot of people, it's important that their family like the person they choose to date or marry. This was certainly the case in 2018 for 21-year-old Nazirke Bekjanova, a junior doctor who rejected a marriage proposal from a 26-year-old teacher named Chingiz Bekhanov. Bekjanova had recently graduated from medical school in Kazakhstan when Bekhanov popped the question. She said no, because her family didn't approve of him. Bekhanov was outraged. He attacked Bekjanova with a knife while they sat in his car and brutally decapitated her. Then he tried to commit suicide by stabbing himself in the abdomen. He left a suicide note asking that the couple be buried together, but Bekhanov was found clinging to life and was rushed to the hospital in a grave but stable condition. Meanwhile, Bekjanova's body was found in the car. The young woman had just started her first job as a doctor, and she had her whole life ahead of her when it was abruptly snuffed out. People who knew the couple were shocked that Bekhanov would go to such extremes. He really didn't seem capable of doing something like this. At the time the news of the tragedy broke, he faced a murder charge and a sentence of up to 15 years in prison if convicted. Number 8. Amina Barami. Amina Barami's life was forever changed in 2004 when a man named Majid Movahedi attacked her with acid after she repeatedly rejected his numerous requests for a hand in marriage. The Iranian woman screamed in anguish on the street as a crowd gathered around, unsure of how to help her. She lost her eyesight and suffered from disfiguring burns to much of her face and body. Meanwhile, Movahedi bragged to those around him about what he had just done. A court ruled 4 years later that Barami could watch as a doctor stood over the man and poured several drops of acid in his eye. This eye for an eye punishment, known as qisas, is an option in traditional Islamic courts when the victim's family fails to reach an agreement with the perpetrator. Although Barami was blinded in both eyes, the ruling only allowed for Movahedi to be blinded in one eye. This is because women are seen as being worth only half as much as men under the ruling legal system. The survivor told the media that she was happy with the sentence and that she wasn't resorting to the punishment out of revenge, but to fight against the type of suffering she endured. The day finally came to carry out the punishment in 2011. Officials were counting down the seconds until they would render Movahedi unconscious and pour the acid in his eye. Barami had a sudden change of heart and stopped them from proceeding at the last moment. She told The Guardian that Movahedi fell at her feet in gratitude. Up until that point, he had expressed no remorse for what he'd done. She told him to go away and never speak her name again. Barami later wondered whether she made the right decision as acid attacks continued throughout Iran. She thinks that if she had gone along with the punishment, maybe it would have set an example to discourage others from committing the same crime. To add insult to injury, Movahedi was released from prison without compensating Barami's family, as the court had ordered him to do. Number 7. Jason Eaton and Wendy Sabatini. One day in 2016, 43-year-old Jason Eaton entered the Greensburg Police Department in Indiana and confessed to killing his girlfriend, Wendy Sabatini. He told officers that he had approached her in her bedroom with an engagement ring. She supposedly turned down the proposal before he could even ask, so he grabbed a gun from the nightstand and shot her in the head from behind. Eaton then went to the home of another woman who accompanied him to the police station. He reportedly told her that he'd messed up and that he thought he had killed his girlfriend. Police went to Sabatini's home and were let inside by her son, who thought his mother was at work. They found her body in a room with a gunshot wound to the head. Eaton pled guilty to murder and is currently serving a 45-year sentence. If he lives long enough to see freedom, he'll do 2 years of probation. Number 6. Leona Linda Taylor and William Walter Franco. It's pretty common for a couple to exchange naughty photos these days. Consequently, there's a growing problem of scorned exes publicizing and circulating nude images of their former lover in a bid for revenge. One of the earliest revenge porn cases to make its way to the courts happened in Hawaii. In 2003 and 2004, a woman named Leona Linda Taylor took revealing pictures of herself at the suggestion of a therapist as a way to help her heal from past trauma. They made their way into the hands of a man she was dating named William Walter Franco. Taylor eventually lost interest in Franco. At one point, he proposed to her, and she rejected him. She ended her relationship with him in late 2004 and moved on with her life. A year later, she married someone else. It wasn't until late 2007 that Taylor found out Franco had put her intimate photos online and sent them to one of her co-workers. He also posted the woman's personal information, as well as how to contact her, Taylor searched the internet and found her pictures and information on several other websites. She was understandably humiliated and sought therapy as random people began to contact her looking for sex. Law enforcement failed to help, saying that there wasn't much they could do without more information about the people contacting Taylor. So she hired an attorney and sued Franco in civil court for damages relating to the ordeal, which had upended her life. At the time, Hawaii had no laws banning revenge porn specifically, but Taylor's lawyer presented a compelling enough case for the court to rule in her favor, to the tune of $425,000. And while it sounds like a lot of money, it doesn't fully make up for the level of embarrassment she had endured and was likely to still face in the future. Number 5. Turning the tables. A 28-year-old man believed to be from Great Britain stirred up some controversy on Reddit last year when he took to the forum about a marriage proposal gone wrong. He had asked his girlfriend of 4 years to marry him and did everything he could think of to make it perfect. She had said that she didn't want a public proposal, so he made a nice meal at home and then popped the question. The man's girlfriend said that she wanted to marry him eventually, but she rejected the offer because she wasn't ready. He suggested a long engagement, but she still wasn't comfortable with the idea. So he told her that when she was ready for that level of commitment, it would be on her to get on one knee and propose to him with an engagement ring in hand. The girlfriend disagreed and accused the man of punishing her for not being ready for marriage. He asked fellow Redditors for their opinions. Some commenters agreed that the girlfriend should be the one to propose next, while others said that the couple should probably just break up because the sting of the woman's rejection might be too hard to work past. The man admitted that the rejected proposal and how to handle the matter going forward were putting a strain on the relationship. He wrote that he wasn't trying to punish her, but that he had laid his cards on the table. She knew where he stood, so it was on her to make the next move. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, but hit that subscribe button first. Number 4. Christopher Tucker and Tara Serino. There was something that Fred Serino didn't like about his 19-year-old daughter Tara's friend, 34-year-old Christopher Tucker. But he couldn't stop her from going to the man's home in Berks County, Pennsylvania, one night in 2017. Tara never came home. Several days later, Christopher's father, John Tucker, showed up at Fred Serino's house with some of the teen's belongings. He told Serino that police had pulled Christopher over in Illinois. They ended up taking him for a mental health evaluation because he wasn't making much sense, and they found some of Tara's things in the vehicle. Tara wasn't with Christopher when he got arrested. Her father filed a missing persons report, and police interviewed Christopher. He reportedly told them that he had asked Tara to marry him, but she said no, that she was sleeping with other men, and that he might as well kill her. He took her suggestion seriously and strangled her to death. Then he gouged her eyes out and struck her repeatedly with a hatchet. After wrapping Tara's body in a rug, Christopher skipped town. Thankfully, it looks like he won't be getting out of prison anytime soon. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder last year. Number 3. Kutubuddin Hatimbai Shahiwala. When a 26-year-old woman from Yemen turned down his marriage proposal in 2018, a 28-year-old Indian man named Kutubuddin Hatimbai Shahiwala decided to get creative with his revenge. Knowing that she would soon catch a flight back to Yemen from Mumbai, he called the airport and told them that she was carrying a bomb in her bag. The woman was detained upon her arrival at the airport and was found to be free of contraband. She told authorities that Shahiwala had threatened to cause trouble if she left him and helped to confirm the WhatsApp number he had used to make the false report. Shahiwala had met the woman online several months earlier. He told her he was a wealthy businessman, and she traveled from Mumbai with her father to meet him. She soon learned that Shahiwala had lied about his job, and that he actually worked as a mechanic. Naturally, she turned down his marriage proposal. After all, nobody enjoys being lied to. Police arrested Shahiwala at his home and took him into custody, reminding him that no matter how burned someone feels after rejection, they still have to respect the person's right to say no. Number 2. Nikhil Handa. Indian Army Major Nikhil Rai Handa met Shailaja Dwivedi in 2015 when he and her husband were stationed at the same barracks. During that time, Shailaja and Handa became friends. It wasn't long before the married major misinterpreted the friendship as a deeper connection and began stalking Shailaja. He became obsessed with the woman, placing over 3,000 phone calls to her over a 6-month span. The desperate admirer continuously tried to persuade Shailaja to leave her husband and marry him instead. In the meantime, Shailaja's husband, Major Amit Dwivedi, became concerned about the nature of his wife's interactions with Handa. He banned her from having any interaction with the deluded stalker. Shailaja, however, insisted that she continue to talk to him. He told her he was a wealthy businessman, and she traveled from Mumbai with her father to meet him. She soon learned that Shahiwala had lied about his job, and that he actually worked as a mechanic. Naturally, she turned down his marriage proposal. But the pair went against Vetti's wishes and met up one day at the military hospital, where Shailaja had a physical therapy appointment. After spending a few hours walking around together, they sat in Handa's car. At some point, he got into an argument with his wife on the phone. Shailaja remained silent as Handa told his spouse that he was planning to divorce her. When he hung up, he made one last-ditch effort to convince his love interest to ditch her husband and be with him. She refused, and Handa slit her throat and ran over her with his car. He allegedly showed no remorse when police arrested him for Shailaja's murder. Sadly, it's a case of, if I can't have you, nobody can. Number 1. Maria Sadakat. Maria Sadakat was a young teacher at a school in Islamabad, Pakistan. She caught the eye of the school owner's son, who asked her to marry him in 2016. But Maria wasn't interested, and she turned down the offer. Sadly, she paid for it with her life. Shortly after her rejection, a group of men showed up at the woman's home and brutally beat her. They poured gasoline on her and set her on fire, and then just left her outside to die. Maria suffered burns to 85% of her body and ended up dying from her injuries. The man's father and school owner was among the group that viciously murdered her, according to her father. Her aunt told the BBC that the man who wanted to marry her niece already had a wife and child. He wanted her to run the school that his father owns. It's reportedly common in Pakistan for men to kill women for rejecting a marriage proposal. In the aftermath of Maria's death, a village elder allegedly told her father that his honor was at stake. Others urged him to stay quiet about the matter and handle it outside court. Activists are fighting to draw more attention to these so-called honor killings, which go largely unreported. These brutal slayings are often worked out under Islamic laws that were introduced in the 1980s, which allow the victim's family to pardon the murderer in exchange for money or other considerations. The fight for women's rights in Pakistan continues, as religious groups argue that campaigning for equality promotes obscenity.
Number 10. Deadly Underwater Photo Shoot. Adult film actress Molly Cavalli got into a bit of an underwater dilemma in 2017 during a photo shoot off the coast of Florida. It was honestly a pretty strange situation. Molly had just been lowered into the water inside of a protective shark cage, part of a stunt to take seductive pictures with lemon sharks swimming in the background. It should have been a fun time, but it wasn't. Moments after Molly was submerged in the cage, she was attacked. Before Molly even knew what was happening, a lemon shark had managed to chomp down on her ankle. She screamed, the water turned a terrible shade of crimson, and she was pulled out, gasping for air. If you're wondering how in the world she got bit by a shark while inside a protective cage, it was actually a bit of a screw-up on her end. Molly had unwittingly dangled her foot outside the cage's barrier, and this enticed the shark. It saw her foot as a delicious piece of bait and went in to take it. She was lucky the shark didn't bite her whole foot off. The shoot was immediately abandoned, and Molly was rushed to the hospital, where she had to get 20 stitches. Number 9. Shark in the belly. In 2017, snorkeler Irvin McCarty was diving with a group off the coast of Marathon City in the Florida Keys. During the trip, the captain of a local boat asked Irvin if he could help get a giant grouper out of a hole. A spear fisherman had managed to shoot the grouper, but then it wiggled into a hole and refused to come out. Irvin had a pretty good reputation for dragging groupers out of their hiding spots, so he agreed to give the captain a hand. But Irvin had a lot more to deal with than just a stubborn grouper. He found himself on the wrong side of a shark attack. According to Irvin, the second he got down and started fiddling with the dark underwater hole, a shark came out of a different hole and bit him on the stomach. Normally, a shark would bite somebody and then swim away, giving them enough time to retreat. But this shark refused to let go. It sunk its shark teeth right into Irvin's stomach and stayed there. He had to grip the shark tightly with both hands so that it didn't thrash its head and rip his guts open, spilling Irvin's innards into the water. It was a truly horrific situation. Irvin had to get back to the boat while holding the shark snugly against his stomach. He had no hands to swim and could only kick himself back to the surface. Once back to the boat, someone had to kill the nurse shark with a knife and then pry it off of him like a leech or a parasite. Irvin walked away with a minor gash on his belly, but it could have been a lot worse. Number 8. One scared fisherman. Fisherman Joel Gray was standing on the shoreline of Matata Beach in New Zealand's Bay of Plenty when he thought he had caught a very large fish. He had something huge hooked on the end of his line and was eagerly reeling it in. But his excitement turned to terror when he realized the thing on the end of his line was actually a great white shark. This happened in early 2022, attracting a crowd of intrigued yet fearful beachgoers. They watched as Joel wrestled with the great white. It breached the water at least 6 times, getting closer and closer to the fisherman, before it finally snapped the line and broke loose. It was a scary yet exciting experience for everyone, especially the fisherman who was unsure if the shark would get close enough to bite. Joel held his ground, just kind of going with it until the monster broke loose. He was relatively safe on the shore, but still, if he had reeled the shark all the way onto the sand, it definitely could have lashed out and bit his leg. Number 7. The Italian swimming instructor. In March of 2022, an Italian tourist was killed off the coast of Colombia's San Andres Island after he got into a fight with a very big and very hungry shark. According to CBS News, the unusual attack took place in a popular snorkeling area on the southwest side of the island. The island, although part of Colombia, is in the Caribbean Sea, about 230 miles, 370 kilometers from Nicaragua. The victim, identified by Colombian presses as 56-year-old Antonio Rosetto degli Abruzzi, was swimming near a cliff with a group of other tourists when a tiger shark came out of nowhere. The shark was about 8 feet, 2.4 meters long, which isn't actually that big for this species. We don't actually know what happened between Antonio and the shark. Beachgoers and other swimmers were alerted to the attack only when they heard him screaming and crying near the cliff and saw the water turn a grisly shade of red. Luckily, there were good Samaritans who heard his cries and swam over to help, assisting Antonio onto dry land. But by that time, he had already gone into hypovolemic shock caused by abundant blood loss and was near delirious. Antonio was taken to the hospital, where he was declared dead. Number 6. Hero Priest. Surfer Mill Mummet was about 300 feet, 91 meters from shore in Bunker Bay, Western Australia, when he found himself the victim of a shark attack. It was July 31st, 2020, a beautiful and sunny day at the busy beach. While Phil was out catching some waves, Father Liam Ryan was hanging out in the shallow water with his friends. The priest then noticed an enormous dorsal fin sticking out of the water, creeping closer and closer to Phil. The priest knew something was about to happen and acted just in time to save the surfer's life. Phil didn't even realize he was being stalked by the shark and had no idea it was near him until it chomped into his surfboard and bit down on his lower leg. The surfer was tipped into the water, which immediately bubbled with blood. Phil panicked, but was able to jam his mangled surfboard into the shark's mouth as it continued to try and eat him. Since the priest had seen what was about to happen and was already acting, he managed to paddle out, grab the injured surfer, and help him back to shore before the shark could do any more damage. Luckily, the shark bite had just missed Phil's artery. It was sheer luck that he didn't bleed to death in the water, even with the priest's intervention. The surfer was taken to the hospital and made a full recovery, and the priest was given the Australian Bravery Award and hailed as a hero. Number 5. 2 sharks at once. The only thing worse than being attacked by a shark is being attacked by 2 sharks at the same time. That's exactly what happened in July of 2000 when a 15-year-old boy went surfing at Nahoon Reef in South Africa. He had just finished his first day back at school following the winter break and was eager to catch some waves. But after about 1.5 hours, a great white shark estimated to be 12 feet, 3.6 meters long, smashed into him so hard that the boy was thrown out of the water and into the air. Then the shark grabbed his hand, dragged him under the water, and another shark tried to bite off his head. The boy's name is Jack Dutton, and it was a miracle he survived, especially since all the other surfers left him in the water to die and frantically paddled to the beach. He was 300 feet, 91 meters out at sea by himself, totally on his own. It was by sheer luck that a huge wave rolled up and he was able to catch it, holding onto his surfboard and paddling furiously with one hand, barely hanging on by scraps of skin. According to Jack himself, he could literally feel the water rushing through his bones. Jack eventually made it to dry land and was rushed to the hospital and had to have his fingers sewn back together. The shark had chomped through his arm and his wrist bone, and he has scars to prove it. Amazingly, Jack has never stopped surfing. It's just that he's a bit more careful now when it comes to sharks. Number 4. Fatal attack in Morro Bay. On Christmas Eve of 2021, a man died in a tragic Morro Bay shark attack. According to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Thomas Abraham Butterfield was bitten multiple times by a great white shark, resulting in massive blood loss and death. Thomas was only 42 years old when the incident occurred. He had been out bodyboarding in a popular area known locally as the Pit, near Morro Rock. The official cause of death given by the coroner was complications of multiple penetrating blunt force injuries. He had been bitten on his right shoulder, the right side of his chest, and his head. These are the last places you want to be bit by a shark. Judging by the teeth marks, the shark had actually readjusted its grip on the man, like a dog readjusting its toothy grip on a bone. As sad as all this is, we don't actually know what went on out there in the water. Thomas had gone swimming by himself, and his body wasn't discovered until around an hour after he was killed. Number 3. 2 attacks in one day. 2 shark attacks occurred just hours apart in Western Australia in 2018. The first attack happened at Cobblestone Beach near Gracetown when a 37-year-old surfer named Alejandro Travellini was knocked off his surfboard by a massive shark. It took a huge chunk out of his leg, nearly swimming away with the entire limb. He was rescued by some other surfers and airlifted to a hospital in Perth. You might think that after such an incident, people would stop surfing at the beach, at least for a couple of days. But within hours, surfers were back in the water as if nothing had happened. Then, 41-year-old Jason Longgrass was also bitten on the leg by a shark. This time, the shark took a bite out of his surfboard, and Jason narrowly escaped dismemberment. Witnesses say they saw a great white shark at least 13 feet, 4 meters long, swimming in the area, and it could have been the same one responsible for both attacks. In the aftermath, Jason healed up okay, and Alejandro had to have surgery on both his legs, just so he could walk again. Number 2. An underwater brawl. Heather West was out snorkeling with some friends near Loggerhead Key in January of 2022 when she had the experience of a lifetime. Heather lives in a van and travels around the United States. She was eager to explore the area with a couple of guys she'd met while traveling. When they got there, everything looked good and they decided to do some snorkeling. But the water became rough, so they decided to head back to shore. Just before she got out of the water, something tugged on her right foot. Heather's initial thought was that one of her friends was teasing her, but in fact, an enormous lemon shark had clamped its huge jaws around her foot and was trying to drag her under the water. What followed was a marine brawl with a deadly animal. Instinctively, Heather kicked the beast in the face with her free foot, but it kept tugging, and so she leaned forward in the water and started punching the shark right in its face. According to what she told news outlets, she punched it repeatedly for about 30 seconds before it finally had enough and gave up. Thankfully, her friends saw what was happening and quickly ran to her aid. They got her out of the water and took her to the hospital. But things weren't looking good. The shark had ripped her foot apart, and it was barely still attached to her leg. She had to be flown to a different hospital where a specialist stitched her foot up just in time to save it from being amputated. Number 1. The first attack of 2022. The unofficial shark bite capital of the world is Smyrna Beach in Florida. The very first shark attack here of 2022 saw a 21-year-old man from New Jersey get chomped on the knee. He was standing in water up to his waist fishing when the shark came up, tried to bite his leg in half, and then swam away. According to the ocean rescue captain, Tamara Maffers, the young man sustained injuries but was able to be driven to the hospital without paramedics. It was a close call, and the first of what will undoubtedly be a dangerous shark season. But how deadly is anyone's guess? Anytime you wade into the water at a Florida beach, you have a pretty solid chance of winding up in the mouth of a shark.
Number 10. Eric Nerhus. Eric Nerhus was collecting shellfish off the Australian fishing town of Eden with his son and some friends in 2007, when he was suddenly attacked 25 feet beneath the waves. Lurking below was a 10-foot-long shark. Thought to be a great white, the creature nearly swallowed Eric alive. Half his body was in its mouth as he fought desperately to free himself. Thankfully, Eric survived to tell the harrowing story of how he escaped. He told Australia's 9 Network that he felt around for the shark's eye socket and pushed down into it with 2 of his fingers. It shocked the creature into opening its mouth, giving Eric an opportunity to wriggle free. The shark continued trying to bite the man as he swam to safety, surrounded by a crimson cloud of his own blood. Eric credits a weighted lead vest he was wearing with keeping the animal's teeth from sinking into his chest and vital organs. But he didn't exactly emerge from the ordeal unscathed and was treated at a hospital for multiple injuries to his head, torso, and left arm. According to an expert, the hungry shark likely mistook Nerhus for a seal, which are quite common in the waters of Australia. Number 9. Chad Barker. A Decatur, Illinois man named Chad Barker was grateful for his life last year after not 1, but 2 sharks attacked him during a vacation to Belize. He and his wife decided to go snorkeling with nurse sharks, which is generally regarded as a safe activity for tourists. But things went terribly awry less than 30 seconds after the couple entered the water. The current swept Chad into the middle of a shark-feeding frenzy, and 2 8-foot-long specimens sank their teeth into his hand. He told local station WAND-17 that the attack happened incredibly fast. Less than 1 minute passed from the time Chad entered the water to the time he emerged from it with deep wounds. There was no emergency room nearby, so he was taken to a local OBGYN, where he paid $200 for what he considered to be less than good care. Chad decided to finish out the trip despite his injuries. In fact, he and his wife planned to retire in Belize, indicating that while the ordeal was alarming, it fell short of traumatizing the pair. Barker is apparently used to misfortune. He attributed the event to his inherently bad luck, claiming that a black cloud follows him around. And perhaps he's right. Only 6% of shark attacks involve snorkelers, making what happened to him a very rare occurrence. Number 8. Jordan Lindsay. In 2019, 21-year-old Jordan Lindsay joined her family on a trip to the Bahamas. During their 3rd day there, they decided on a whim to go snorkeling at Rose Island, which is famous for its wild swimming pigs. At some point during the excursion, Jordan suddenly began to scream. She was being attacked by multiple sharks. Her mother, Cami, desperately tried to pull her to safety, but her attempts were futile. The sharks ripped off one of Jordan's arms and bit her all over her body, including on her legs, her behind, and the arm that they didn't rip off. By the time the young woman was pulled from the water, she was fading in and out of consciousness. A boat arrived to take Jordan to emergency treatment, but it had no medical supplies, not even a first aid kit. Her family members tried using towels to slow the bleeding, but their efforts were in vain. It was unfortunately too late to save Jordan by the time she arrived at the hospital. Her devastated loved ones called for better medical training among workers in the tourism industry. The company that hosted a snorkeling session offered its condolences to the distraught family and promised to improve its safety protocols. Number 7. Adrienne Wixow. In May of last year, a bull shark attacked a 64-year-old Florida resident named Adrienne Wixow out of the blue while she was on a longboard in the waters off New Smyrna Beach. The vicious fish reportedly clamped its jaws down on the woman's foot and refused to let go as it emerged from the water, thrashing violently and tossing Wixow like a fish in the process. Wixow managed to free herself by kicking the shark with her free foot. Her friend guided her to shore, leaving a bloody trail in the water behind them. The victim was rushed to the hospital, where she underwent a 4-hour operation to repair her shredded foot. Her prognosis was good. doctors predicted that Wixo would make a full recovery, at least physically. But emotionally disentangling from the traumatic event was another story, leaving the woman unsure if she would ever swim in the ocean again. New Smyrna Beach is one of the most notorious places in the world when it comes to the number of shark bites that are known to happen there. Most injuries are minor, but each encounter serves as a sobering reminder that nobody is immune to a shark attack, and that there's always a chance of things turning out much worse, or perhaps even deadly. And bites were uncharacteristically low last year, but experts did not take this as a sign that things are improving long-term. Instead, they attributed the unusually low bite rate to COVID-19 restrictions that kept most people at home. Number 6. Lucas Cruz. 15-year-old Lucas Cruz came terrifyingly close to death in August of last year when a 500-pound bull shark sank its teeth into his body. The youngster was lobstering in the waters off Maine when the attack happened. At first, he thought he had been hit by a boat, only to realize moments later that there were no boats nearby. The shark proceeded to bite Lucas all over his legs, causing serious muscle damage and severing his Achilles tendon. Cruz bled profusely, and while he didn't think that he was going to die, he began to worry that he might lose his leg. He lost an estimated 70% of his blood volume, bringing him closer to death than he probably realized. But he survived, and doctors even managed to repair his legs. Miraculously, they predicted that the boy would make a full recovery. Speaking with Newsweek, Dr. Liz Ramal said that Lucas may need more reconstructive surgery in the future, but she predicted that he would soon be back to normal. The traumatized teen said that he didn't plan on returning to the water anytime soon, but that he was sure he would get back to it eventually. Many of his family's activities are water-based, so if he wants to spend as much quality time with them as he's used to, he kind of has no choice but to leave dry land at some point. Number 5. Kayla Marlowe. 19-year-old Kayla Marlowe was the first person to die from a shark attack in New Zealand in 8 years last year. She was in the water at Waihi Beach on the country's North Island when bystanders suddenly heard screaming. A great white shark had grabbed hold of the young woman and was dragging her deeper into the water as it viciously mauled her. Lifeguards rushed to get Kaylee to dry land. Emergency responders performed CPR on her for 20 minutes, but failed to revive her. She suffered fatal injuries to her leg and was pronounced dead at the scene. To prevent another tragedy, swimmers were ordered out of the water. At a vigil memorializing Marlowe, local resident Mark Wilson told the press that it was common to see sharks in the area, and that he believed it was only a matter of time before a tragedy like this would happen. Other locals agreed that sharks are often seen in the region, but said that the creatures are usually harmless. Number 4. 2010 Egypt shark attacks. Toward the end of 2010, the Egyptian seaside city of Sharm el-Sheikh was hit with an unusually high number of shark attacks. The sudden spree of violence started on December 1st of that year, when a shark left 48-year-old Olga Martinenko with severe spine and limb injuries. Thankfully, she survived, thanks to some bystanders who pulled her from the water. The next attack happened just minutes later, when a shark bit off 70-year-old beachgoer Ludmila Stolyarova's foot and arm. Onlookers used rubber fins to scare the creature off. 54-year-old Yevgeny Trishkin was the angry shark's next target. He lost part of his leg in the ordeal. After that, 46-year-old Viktor Kohli lost a foot. All 4 victims were Russian and Ukrainian tourists. The government immediately closed its beaches and summoned experts to investigate. They caught 2 suspected culprits, a 7.5-foot white-tip shark and an 8-long-foot mako shark. But the carnage resumed just a day after the beaches reopened, when a shark bit off a 71-year-old German woman's arm. Sadly, she died from her injuries. Researchers suspected that shark behavior in the area had been changed by overfishing, leading hungry creatures to become more aggressive towards humans than usual. Additionally, scuba diving companies were accused of feeding sharks to attract tourists, thereby teaching the animals to associate people with food. The attacks may have also been triggered by bloody sheep remains that were dumped in the water as part of the recent Eid al-Adha holiday. Number 3. Julie D'Imperio Holowak. While swimming with a daughter off Bailey Island during a vacation to Maine in 2020, New York resident Julie D'Imperio Holowak was fatally attacked by a great white shark. The mother-daughter duo was seen laughing and playing together in the water when a massive creature suddenly breached the surface and pulled Holowak under. At the same time, people nearby began to hear screaming. The attack happened just 60 feet from shore. Horrified onlookers watched as Hollowak thrashed for just a few seconds before her body went limp, according to NBC 10 Boston. Good Samaritans and emergency responders worked together to get the 63-year-old woman to shore, and they fought to save her life, but she tragically succumbed to her injuries. Scientists identified the attacking specimen as a great white shark, based on a tooth fragment that was recovered from the scene. The deadly incident was an unusual event, in the words of Maine Department of Resources Commissioner Patrick Kelleher. And it's true that great whites are rarely spotted in the waters off Maine, which is at the northern end of their range. But it's also not unheard of for one to be seen in the area, and there are recorded sightings dating back to the 1800s. On average, 2 or 3 are spotted in the region every year, but researchers think that number could soon increase due to climate change warming the ocean. Number 2. Thomas Abraham Butterfield. Details of a deadly shark attack that happened off the California coast late last year were finally just released to the media. 42-year-old Thomas Abraham Butterfield was bodyboarding in Morro Bay of Sacramento on Christmas Eve when a great white shark bit him in the head, leaving him with a fractured skull and other catastrophic wounds. He was dead within minutes of the attack. Another surfer found the man tethered to his board and dragged him back to shore, but a medical examiner later determined that he was probably dead before he reached dry land. The newly released coroner's report details the gruesome injuries, which include bites to the head, chest, and shoulder, with the largest cut measuring 16 inches long. One of the shark's teeth was found inside Butterfield's body. DNA tests confirmed that it belonged to a great white. Butterfield was in a turbulent area with murky waters known as the Pit when the fatal encounter occurred. Some surfers avoid these conditions because they believe that great whites are more likely to be lurking in areas like this. The victim's uncle, Grant Butterfield, told the Los Angeles Times that the loss of his nephew was terrible, especially since Thomas was just starting to make something of himself when his life was cut short. Number 1. Parker Blanchette. Parker Blanchette is an avid surfer who hits the waves 6 times a week, even after being attacked by a shark last year at the age of 14. The 8th grader was surfing at North Beach near Honolulu when a shark came out of nowhere and bit him in the foot. He felt what he described as a small punch to the leg and swam to shore at the first sight of blood. Thankfully, the shark only clamped its jaws down for about a half second before letting go, and the creature wasn't huge. By Parker's estimate, it measured roughly 5.5 feet long, but it still managed to do quite a bit of damage. Once he reached dry land, Parker called his mom, Amanda, and calmly told her about what had happened. His laid-back approach to a serious medical emergency helped to keep Amanda from panicking as EMTs treated the wound and took her son to the emergency room, where he received over 100 stitches. Parker spent 2 days in the hospital. Amanda was inspired by the boy's ability to keep his cool in a stressful and terrifying situation. She was especially surprised to learn that the shark had bit Parker dangerously close to an artery. He was lucky that it missed the mark, which would have easily killed him. In a demonstration of maturity that proves he is wise beyond his years, Parker acknowledged that when he goes surfing, he's in the shark's territory. He wasn't angry at the animal and said that he was eager to heal so that he could get back out on the water. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have your foot torn off by a shark or have to spend the night alone in the jungle? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!